Hello, ladies and gentlemen. I hope I'm going live about now or probably like 5 seconds from now, depending if I'm still familiar with how OBS works after 10 days of a hiatus. I think it's now 11 or 12, to be quite honest. I apologize for the break. To be quite honest, yes, I was busy, some personal stuff, some work stuff. But also, amidst it all, we didn't get too many big Apple news in general. Even today, I would argue, is more of like a summary video trying to react to the biggest stuff that has happened in like the last 2 weeks or so, primarily talking about like Mark Gurman's reporting about iOS 27, which is kind of more interesting for the things it's probably not going to have than for the things it will have, which, yes, it is also going to bring up a lot of philosophical discussions that always pop up in the Apple community. It feels like every year everyone wants every iOS release to be iOS 12 or macOS. I apologize. OS 10 Snow Leopard, like no new features, nothing but refinements, nothing new optimization improvements. I'll probably should get to at some point to analyzing OS 10 Snow Leopard back in the day. Like, not I'll go back back to the day, but I will try to give some context that OS 10 Snow Leopard was not a feature-free release, and its focus on optimization and improvements, like performance optimizations, did not come out of like, oh my god, we just rewrote every line of code to be 10% more efficient here or there. A lot of it came to switching to brand new technologies back in the day. Like, the changes like that are not something you can really expect very often. Also, Snow Leopard launched in a very buggy state for weeks and months. Apple even in subsequent keynotes like brought up, here's a even better release of Snow Leopard essentially. That being said, we will get to the fact that people are talking about iOS 27 in the vein of OS 10 Snow Leopard and iOS 12. iOS 12, I think, being the far, far better metaphor. Even iOS 12, by the way, was not entirely devoid of features, but it did focus on performance improvements, efficiency gains, longer battery life. All that stuff was really great release. Unfortunately, followed up by iOS 13, which was very buggy in its early stages. It got fixed very quickly, but like iOS 13 to 13.1 really wasn't everything we believe Apple to be sometimes. That being said, yes, that is the main story of today. However, we do have a little bit of hardware news. Some good, some bad, depending on your perspective. I already see Rosa joining the chat. Hello to everyone. I know that YouTube is not going to recommend this video for you guys to watch. I posted the link in Discord. I posted the link in Twitter. I haven't been that active on Twitter, to be honest. So you're probably way better off following me on Discord in the future. I just post way more on there, and it happens all conversationally with what you guys post, so it makes it far more interesting to read. If I just post this stuff as like individual tweets, it's just gonna read like rambling. But because it's responding to something you guys ask or something you guys posted, and because I can even like reference back old posts from me where I either predict something or already comment on something, it's just a much more enjoyable read. You'll find a link to the Discord in the description of this channel. If you want to support this channel in other ways, please subscribe, please like this video, share it out with anybody who you think might enjoy it, and comment live. I love interacting with a lively comment section. Comment afterwards to help with the algorithm. It all helps tremendously. If you want to support me directly, leave a super chat or super sticker right while I'm live, or you can of course become a long-term channel member right here on YouTube. Shout out to all our MarkTech Pro Max members. Or even support us over on Patreon. Same to the MarkTech Pro Max tier over there. Obviously, that's a lot of intro rambling out of the way, but I thought it was a little bit necessary given my longer break this time. And let's actually get started with some classic stuff for the MarkTech channel, which is analyzing what another Mark has written, in this case, Bloomberg's Mark Gurman. Now, the reason why I even put the Snow Leopard disc, I put the disc version which had the actual Snow Leopard, not the... I think the one I posted was actually like a subsequent release that had like a few bug fixes and changes already on the disc, which this is why I was never a fan of discs, to be honest. And even on platforms where I do have still access to physical media, like my PlayStation, even though I don't technically own a disc drive from my PS5 Pro, I never buy discs. I don't buy Blu-rays. I don't buy music CDs. It's just an old format. I appreciate some of the pro-consumerism that comes, or at least the versatility for consumers that comes with physical media, the ability to buy it in a store, to sell it, to lend it to somebody. But even then, with like an operating system DVD, that's a little bit more of a challenge. So plus, like, how valuable is the macOS 10 Snow Leopard disc? I mean, probably for collection purposes, it is worth a little something. But when you consider like the energy that is needed to produce the disc, to distribute it, it's just a much, much larger environmental footprint, which, yes, I know a lot of people don't care about as much, especially for like individual consumers, trying to focus more on big companies, which is fair, but that doesn't mean that individually we cannot make decisions that benefit the environment. That being said, that's a lot of intro rambling now out of the way, and let's start with the first story of today, something that I've alluded to a lot actually. Also, speaking of PlayStation, that's even more intro rambling. I got a PS Portal. Yes, I know, like cloud gaming, I'm not the biggest fan of the concept. I have to say this works extremely well. Now for remote play at home, it actually is perfect. Like even in my bedroom, it just connects to my PS5 Pro perfectly. It has better image quality that way, obviously, than when it connects to a PS5 in the cloud. But also even with regular cloud, it just works a lot better than I thought. It's a birthday present from my mom, so thank you, Mom. I thought I might give it back or like return it to PlayStation, but I'm really loving it, really enjoying it. Got it even before the Black Friday discounts. Love the 30th anniversary gray look of the original PlayStation, so shout out to that piece of hardware. I guess it's not Apple related, and I know how you guys get when I talk a lot about gaming or something like that. But yeah, just a little bit of a shout out to my new gadget here. So, Apple iOS 27 to be no frills Snow Leopard update other than new AI. Now, I put it, I guess, a little bit provocatively in the title with like a question mark and an exclamation point. Basically like, oh, is it just going to be a bad release then? Like a lot of Windows 11 has been recently. Like Windows 11 recently broke performance in a lot of major games like Assassin's Creed Shadows in like a small patch that wasn't even optional to install. They broke the performance of their version of the activity monitor, which if you turned it on, it just started like every instance of that app was basically like another instance on the processor. So it just kept on accumulating like basically pressure on the operating system, consuming more cores, more threads, more RAM. And that's just two examples of like that are pretty niche. There have been much bigger things. But yeah, in general, there's like, if you go to channels like Gamers Nexus, for example, which of course focuses on like gaming benchmarks, whether it's CPU or GPU, all of that happens on Windows for them. There are now more and more channels that are either recommending you get some kind of Linux-based hardware, whether it's something like the Steam Deck or the Lenovo Legion Go S, or that you install Linux on your main desktop, something like Bazite. Now, I am not fetishizing Linux. I think it has a lot of issues that still, for the vast majority of users, probably make Windows the more natural choice, not to be speaking even of the fact that it's the default experience, especially if you like buy a laptop or something like that. But there's also a reason why Mac has been growing so much. And it's not just that Apple Silicon is great, because it is, but Apple Silicon seems especially great once you compare it to like the driver issues, the system bloat. Like when you consider that Windows by default like tries to clutter up like 6 to 7 gigabytes of memory, even on like resource limited SoC systems. There is a lot to consider, and this is why I really wanted to get into the meat and potatoes of that story. Unfortunately, in typical Mark Gurman fashion, there isn't that much meat on the bone of this story. Not to say that it's bad in any way, but I would love to know what usually like stability and performance optimizations mean. Sometimes it's literally just debugging a lot of code, making sure it works well. Sometimes it's switching to entirely new technologies. Will there be a new version of Metal? Will it potentially cut off like older devices, not from entirely from support, but maybe from the new optimizations, right? So like iOS 12 by itself was differently optimized on like differently new hardware back in the day. Mac OS Snow Leopard did actually OS 10 Snow Leopard. Oh, it's Mac OS 10 Snow Leopard. Actually, like cut off a decent amount of devices in terms of like the future facing features that it introduced. Newer APIs, stuff like OpenCL back in the day. So unfortunately, Mark Gurman, I'm not sure if he's not tech savvy enough or his sources just aren't in those particular nerdy parts, or if he's just not interested and isn't asking the right questions. But unfortunately, we are not getting these answers. Thirsty. Sorry, it's a long day at work. A lot of talking today. Yeah, this is a classic image for anybody who, like me, used to rewatch Apple keynotes religiously. This is Bertrand Soleil introducing macOS 10 Snow Leopard. Ironically, he and Craig have a very similar look in the way they like wear like bright shirts with dark pants. Obviously, Craig has his iconic full head of hair. Bertrand did not. He spoke with a very lovely French accent. At least I think it's French. It could be something else, but judging from the name, I would surmise it's French. But yes, macOS 10 Snow Leopard goes back like, all the way to 2009, so we are talking over 15 years ago. Is that really representative of the kind of technological focus that Apple should employ in 2026, which at that point would be 17 years after this WWDC? It remains to be seen. So let's get to what Mark Gurman is writing here. After a lot of intro babbling, but I guess I really needed it after being offline for a while. Apple's next major iPhone software update, iOS 27, which, yes, this will make predictions for branding a lot easier. We know next year is iOS 27, macOS 27, all that jazz, will have two major elements: quality improvements and AI features. Also, the report on Tim Cook's imminent departure as CEO is premature, and OpenAI continues poaching Apple engineers. Lastly, the iPhone Air designer who introduced the device has left the company. Now, here I kind of have to say I love the iPhone Air design. I sincerely don't care if one person leaves. I know a lot of people try to always like ring the alarm. Fact is, there's a lot of poaching back and forth right now. Is Apple losing like more people to the new incumbent AI companies than AI companies are? Probably overall, yes. But quite honestly, if people are leaving Apple to get a quick buck at companies that right now might actually be paying them not as much in money, though I guess Meta is, Mark Zuckerberg is, but might actually pay them in stocks or if they're private companies like part ownership or whatever, I don't actually think that Apple has that much they can do against that. I've seen some people argue, oh, Apple should like triple and quadruple their pay. And I'm like, look, I understand Apple has basically limitless finances. But when you look, for example, at what Microsoft is doing to keep development costs low, they're letting people go left and right, like talented engineers, long term employees, developers at Xbox gaming studios that are not easily replaceable. Apple is doing none of that. Apple is holding on to the talent that they have. They're hiring new talents in areas of expertise that they currently are not covering, right? And yes, there will be some brain drain. However, we've seen that argument time and time again. This is simply what happens. Sometimes it happens out of bad internal management, which I'm not denying is what partially happened with the early push for Apple Intelligence. Like, I think John D'Andrea is not the greatest leader there. I think there's a lot of potential distrust towards, like, how long will he stay in power? If you are somebody he hired, like, you're probably just looking for a new job already, right? If you're like somebody who's very displeased with how he works, you're also probably looking for a new job, right? Now, some of you might be able to get that new job inside of Apple already, but some of you might get poached by OpenAI or by Facebook or by Google, and that's fine. That's how competition is supposed to work. Like, some might say, well, Apple should match those offers or exceed them. To me, the problem is that at my core, I believe that Apple is a hardware and software company. By the software, I mean operating system, core system applications, application and system development tools. This is what I associate Apple with. To me, Apple will never become an AI company. The way that Apple never, to me, became a services company just because iCloud became a bigger deal. Just the way that I never pushed for Apple to build their own search engine to compete directly with Google. Just as I'm fine with Apple putting some ads into their services, but I don't want them to become Google or Microsoft and become egregious data collectors to support those ads. Just as, like, I was fine with Apple playing around with some social media tools, whether it's something successful like iMessage, which at its core is a social media, kind of. It's a messaging platform. But also other examples that were eventually big failures, like Ping for iTunes. I mean, Steve Jobs came out and basically apologized for how bad it is, right? Even in the early stages, Mobile Me, like, Steve Jobs came out and when he introduced iCloud, he said, why should you trust us, right? We are the guys who brought you Mobile Me. And then he made arguments why iCloud is so much better than Mobile Me. Like, I want Apple to focus on the hardware, the software, services that truly, like, bring their system to life. I think that Apple TV has become by far the best streaming service, to the point that, yes, today I did cancel my Netflix subscription. I know I'm rambling quite a lot in this video, but I promise you this will make sense on why I'm bringing all of this up. The reason why I'm complaining is I think Mark Gurman likes to talk about Apple as if Apple is the same as the other big tech companies. That is simply not the case. Amazon is a reseller, yes, but they make their money through cloud. So they're a service online software client, basically. Microsoft makes an operating system with basically no hardware for it, unless you count the occasional Surface refresh. But they also now make the majority of their money from servers. Google runs servers to have their businesses like Google Search and YouTube running, of course. But now Google Cloud is also a huge driver for their growth. So yes, they're also a server company. Meta is a software company in the sense that they run a big social media empire, and around that they're selling ads. I think a lot of their business practices are quite honestly despicable. But yeah, all of these companies, like if you even include more into that FANG or however you want to abbreviate those top 5 to top 10 stocks, you add Netflix to it. That's a software company, right? There's no hardware maker in that upper echelon, not even close. Like Samsung makes a lot of money. Their revenue and their profits are hugely up and down, entirely depending on the current prices of NAND storage and RAM pricing and the competitive landscape, even for things like OLED supply and things like that. Like, who else exists in the same vein as Apple? Like Xiaomi, Huawei. Like, do you think these companies have any like of the worldwide relevance, the finances that go in and out of the company? And my problem is Mark Gurman talks about Apple as if they were a Google or a Microsoft. He talks about like, oh, their software is being poached, or oh, somebody poached 1 or 2 designers. Guess what? That means Apple is losing their lead in design against whom? Against OpenAI, a company who still hasn't put out a single product? Like, yeah, you might lose some employees. I'm not surprised that some people might want to go back to working with Jony Ive. I'm not surprised that people want to get the bag while OpenAI is paying ridiculous amounts of money. But I do want to remind people of things like the Humane AI pin, right? Like, which was lauded for the same things. It was an AI first device. It supposedly was made by ex-Apple engineers, but without the internal structure at Apple, without the incentives to actually make a great piece of hardware, to marry it with a piece of software that's specifically built for it. Like, these are just not the same things. I am very grateful for Mark Gurman's existence and the rumors and the leaks he provides, but I do. This is why I don't cover every single story that he does. Not because I think he isn't trustworthy, not because I think that these stories are entirely worthless, but to me, they play very little role in how I engage with Apple. Whether it's their devices in particular, the broader ecosystem, the community that talks about Apple devices, the community that even talks about Apple as a company. Riley, welcome to the chat, man. Glad you were able to find the stream. I know it's a weird time. I'm streaming about an hour later than I usually do. I did take a longer break. So thank you to anyone who's finding their way back to the channel, their way back to the community. It means a lot to me. So, the starters. In 2009, after the seismic release of macOS 10 Leopard, Apple Incorporated rolled out an operating system called Snow Leopard that was focused on subtle improvements and quality control. This already, I really hope Gurman brings that up, but macOS 10 Snow Leopard, like in the beginning, had a lot of quality control issues, and of course it did. It changed a lot of the underlying code to optimize for new features that would come in the future. It's similar to like if Apple rewrote everything right now in Swift UI. They've been doing it step by step, but if they did it at once, you bet your ass we would be getting one of the least stable releases ever. Riley, yeah, you're correct in this case. The rumors are dry. It doesn't help that we all really expected to be getting new hardware at the end of November. Plus, with going into Thanksgiving week, we are probably not getting that much for the rest of November. Plus, afterwards, it's December, so it's Christmas month. I think we might get like one last big report from the likes of Gurman. We've seen some stuff from Minchi Kuo, but it's really like not until like mid-January would I expect rumors to be coming back full force, unfortunately. The premise was simple: refine the existing software rather than add new features, but it was still an intensive overhaul. Apple rewrote core pieces of the software, yes, fixed bugs and introduced new ones, removed older code, which introduced new bugs, and cleared out unnecessary system files, and made fun of Windows for exposing things like DLLs to regular consumers. The goal was to make the Mac faster, more stable, and more efficient. After years of piling on new apps, features, and design, this is not true. Like, Snow Leopard was not more stable and more efficient simply because it didn't have new features. The extensive rewrites were necessary because by that point a lot of the underlying things in Snow Leopard were things that they are not really features in like the common user sense, but they are necessary to get the system ready for new features and new development paradigms. Let's actually look macOS 10. Is there like a software release wiki that's not? Yeah, there's an Apple wiki. There should be macOS 10 Snow Leopard Intel plus Rosetta. Does this bring up anything here? Jesus Christ, what the F is that? Do they not like can I click on this? Oh yeah, it can. Nice. Greater efficiency in the reduction of overall reduction of memory footprint. That is correct. So the new programming frameworks such as OpenCL to use graphics cards, which have at that point started to overtake CPUs notably in the amount of raw performance, were introduced. That alone introduced also many bugs early on and wasn't always more efficient, again, at start. Later on, especially as other hardware was introduced and as GPUs got so much more powerful that you could run a task like 5 to 10 times faster than it was previously on the CPU, that really helped with efficiency because you got your task done quicker. It includes usable iLife, blah, blah, blah. Really? You're not referencing what's actually that new? If I click on memory footprint, it just references a random Wikipedia page. Really? Wait, did I write macOS? No, I actually wrote it correctly. macOS 10 Snow Leopard wiki. Much of the software in macOS 10 was extensively rewritten for this release in order to take full advantage of modern Macintosh hardware and software technologies. 64-bit, Cocoa, new programming frameworks such as OpenCLs were created, so that's a lot of effort. It was also the first macOS release since System 7.11 to not support Macs uses PowerPC processors. So if you are somebody out there who is currently angry that Intel Macs are being depreciated much quicker than before, then look back to, but you're also somebody who fetishizes Snow Leopard. Well, Snow Leopard dropped PowerPCs, PowerPC-based Macs. The next version of macOS will do the same. Apple has already warned us. macOS 27 is also probably be the last version to support Rosetta. Kind of how Rosetta was dropped in macOS 10 Lion, but Snow Leopard was the last version to support it. This is an Apple pattern. If you think that Apple is like, oh, Apple is reacting out of panic. There's so much negativity towards iOS 26, whatever. No, a big release is often followed by a smaller release, like a TikTok cycle. Like the most and no kids that are 8 years old, if you're watching this video, I don't mean the Chinese short form video platform, but like think about the old cadence of Intel processors before they completely broke it with 14 nanometer. TikTok, usually new architecture, then like a slight architecture change plus a node shrink, then a new architecture again. Like all of this is not new, and it's not based out of panic. It's not based out of, oh my god, Apple is or Apple is thinking back to the old days. No, Apple never lost it. Similar to how when you think iOS 12, at this point 7 years old, yeah, that one did the same when it was necessary. When iOS 11 clearly was a bit too buggy, which that I'm absolutely not denying. I think iOS 13 was fixed relatively quickly. I'll give them that. iOS 14 after that was actually really stable, especially for having a bunch of new features. But iOS 11 really was a long-term buggy issue. I guess that had a lot to do that back in the day, Apple was still very busy trying to potentially save Intel Macs and whatever. So I guess their development resources were spread thin a little. It also wasn't too like long after like some internal issues and stuff like that. So yeah, I'm very happy with the current state. It doesn't mean I think some things shouldn't be better. I would have preferred if iOS 26 essentially launched with 26.1. If Apple had said it's a big redesign, we're upgrading all operating systems simultaneously, we're going to expand the beta testing period, and we're going to launch iOS 26 in late October, and then by late November we're going to have a small 26.1 release. I think that would have been fine, especially for the Mac. It would have been necessary. We're seeing Apple still learning with features like split view, returning to the iPad, clearly listening to what people are asking for, even like that tinted version of liquid glass. So yes, this year is a big year. That means there are a few more bugs than usual. I think like judging what Apple has to do this year, how much they have to juggle, I think 26 has been very good, at least now. And very quickly, again, I brought up some issues that Windows 11 has. Even though Windows 11 is not getting pretty much anything except for AI features, and those AI features are not even that system-based. They're basically like an LLM running kind of, well, mostly through the web. Like in parallel to your system. That's not really what Apple even is trying to do with AI. But yeah, I digress. I know I'm babbling a lot today. Let's get back to the holy writings of Mark Gurman. The approach paid off. Again, no notice, no mention of the fact that Snow Leopard actually launched in quite a buggy state, whatever. And Apple has tried to bring the same quality-first mindset to iOS and iPadOS in recent years. I don't remember them. Like, iOS 12 was the only release to ever mention stuff like that. But, well, except for very early, like, iOS releases, like iOS 3 and 4, and 5, like those systems would bring up stuff like performance improvements a lot more, but that's because iOS was in its infancy and it was much easier to find headroom for improvements. But while the company was able to reduce bugs and improve performance of the iPhone and iPad operating system, it hasn't had the same opportunity to step back and focus on pure refinement. That is correct. In a way, relentless competition in the mobile space has spurred the company to keep revamping its features. I also always want to add, companies are not only like, I know we live in capitalism and whatever, and it's very easy to say, oh, companies always rest on their laurels unless they have competition. There is some truth to it, but imagine if you were an engineer at Apple, right? Would you really just sit the entire year on your ass and not try to like boost your resume by actually working on new features? Do you not want to be the next guy, even though we don't know the guy, who gets his feature memed? Like the auto code input that you get if you get like a code for a website or something like that per SMS message. You know, like the Twitter meme where it's like, whoever coded this deserves a raise. Engineers want to work on new features. They want to develop new stuff. If you tell somebody, oh, we're just in a refinement phase, to many people this reads more like you having given up. It's not just competition, it's just also like your personal desire. And it's not just competition between you and like outside companies, it's also competition between you and other people's inside the company. It's you as an engineer versus another engineer at your team. It's your team versus another team. It's your division versus another division. Not outright antagonistic, but a friendly competition. That's very healthy. Sorry, I really should have refilled the water in something more comfortable. But that's now about to change. After the sweeping design overhaul of iOS 26 and the debut of Liquid Glass across its platforms, that's very important. Liquid Glass, it's not just ambitious in its redesign, but it's very ambitious that Apple is simultaneously launching it on iPhone, iPad, Mac, Apple Watch, Apple TV, actually on all systems except the one that inspired Liquid Glass, which is Vision OS. Apple is working on a Snow Leopard style update. No, they're not. I assure you, they're not like huge entire rewritings of like a new API like OpenCL. There is not a switch to a new framework like 64-bit was in its heyday or starting up at that point. The only thing that will be comparable is leaving behind older hardware, like leaving behind Intel Macs. Honestly, I was a little bit surprised that macOS 26 got Liquid Glass, because we all knew that macOS 26 would get would still be updated for Intel Macs, and I thought that it just would make a lot of sense for Apple to say, you know what, macOS 26 is not a Liquid Glass redesign. That's coming a year later. This year we are focusing primarily on iPhone and iPad. We are refining software however much we can for old Intel Macs so they don't give out on you. But next year they're out, and then Macs get the new design. Well, now Intel Macs actually got the new design, and if you're still running an Intel Mac, you can actually let me know how it's performing for you, because I'm not so sure about that. It's very much built in mind for acceleration, like graphics acceleration on newer Apple Silicon hardware. For iOS 27 and next year's other major operating systems, including macOS 27, the company is focused on improving the software's quality and underlying performance. I haven't noticed major quality problems with iOS 26, so hey, at least he's honest about that, and it didn't suffer the kind of feature delays that the preceding iOS 18 did. That's both true. Thank you, Mark Gurman, for not being entirely negative. But many users have reported bugs and other problems. That is always the case. If you're writing software for essentially like dozens of hardware combinations, like Apple is not Windows, but at some point there are quite a lot of iPhones out there, quite a lot of iPads out there, quite a lot of Macs out there, even the amount of Apple TVs that are still simultaneously supported. So, of course, there will be some issues, but I would actually wager, yes, iOS 26 doesn't have, like iOS 13 did, like a disastrous release that has to be pulled early on and something like that. That's included device overheating, unexplained battery drain, user interface glitches, keyboard failures, cellular connectivity snags, and app crashes. Those are all pretty general bugs. This is stuff that just happens, especially battery drain, which is usually more an issue with third-party applications. We've had that in the past where it turned out like, what was it, Facebook Messenger? Device overheating on iOS 26 as like a final release? Not really. if anything, overheating became like more of a like talking point like 2 years ago in iOS 17. But okay, I guess like if you just line up everything that people ever reported on, like in Mac rumors forums or something like that, yeah, you can bring that up. But like none of this is new, and I don't mean to Apple, but just to overall software development. Like cellular connectivity snacks, yes, that's an issue that can happen, but again, consider how many versions of Qualcomm modems do you have out there, right? Even outside of that, you even still have some Intel modems that are still not technically depreciated. Um, Think about now Apple building their own modems. So now there are several driver paths that need to be supported. Think about on how many different networks these devices operate, right? And yes, you have to write specific code to make support for individual carriers. Not entirely a new like code path or something like that, but like the raw compatibility. Sometimes you optimize even a little bit more. Obviously, it goes a little bit farther if you're working on more exclusive features like millimeter wave. But yeah, like all of this can happen. App crashes. This is always the case with a new operating system, major operating system version. This one is particularly made worse whenever a redesign is happening. It's one of the reasons why Microsoft is so reluctant to actually change Windows at its core, because if apps start crashing, pro apps start crashing, games start crashing, it undermines a lot of the last like pro Windows arguments that Microsoft can build. And yeah, they definitely cannot afford that. As well as sluggishness during system navigation and animations. Yeah, that has been a bit of an issue up until, I would argue, 26.1. To me, 26 in overall has been very fine, kind of similar to how what Mark Gurman is reporting. So I guess the marks agree for once. But it is something that it does exist, even though I would actually argue a lot of people want to make the argument, well, yeah, new hardware performs worse, but have you seen how it works on older? And I obviously, like, my mom just got my 15 Pro Max, so I had to set that up. That one was, of course, running iOS 26 ever since the beta phase. That ran well. My grandma got my mom's 13 Pro Max. That one was on liquid glass, actually almost from like week one. That one is fine. I don't have access to much older hardware, but I've seen even like the latest iPhone SE and how it performs. And when I go back to like the 10s Max that I got back from my grandma, so it's kind of back home now. Like, yes, that's iOS 18, not 26, but it still performs remarkably well. And if it ended up performing poorly on a system like 26, which it does not support, I would just basically put it in like reduced transparency and reduced motion, which for an older device like that, I think is actually absolutely acceptable. But let's get back to Gurman. Aiming to improve, the software engineering teams are now combing through Apple's operating systems, hunting for bloat to cut, bugs to eliminate, and any opportunity to meaningfully boost performance and overall quality. Like Snow Leopard set the groundwork for future overhauls. That is very true, and I'm very glad Gurman is bringing that up. New types of Macs, or to be more precise, to just continue their commitment to Intel Macs back in the day. iOS 26 will lay the foundation for foldable iPhones and other new hardware. It should be noted that if there is a new foldable iPhone next year, not like early 2027 or something like that, then that means that iOS 27, despite not having many new features, will have one of the largest software overhauls in iPhone history. I assume it will be primarily based on the multitasking system that has been brought now even to something like the iPad mini. But that still is one of the largest shift in like the general user experience on iPhone. So no, I don't think that like iOS 27 will be entirely devoid of new iOS features. Still, despite the no new features marketing, 2009 Snow Leopard ultimately did offer a number of enhancements. a redesigned Safari 4, Microsoft Exchange support. True, in 2009, that was a big push by Apple, proper enterprise integration. iOS 3 got some of that as well, alongside, or iPhone OS 3 got that when the iPhone 3GS launched. An all-new QuickTime player, high-resolution video conferencing, and underlying support for the first iteration of the Mac App Store, which became, of course, a much bigger deal when macOS 10 Lion came out. So, yeah. This is why I'm saying never believe that there are no new features, and never believe that the performance or stability update won't have some performance and stability issues on its own. Likewise, next year's Apple's operating system will include fresh capabilities. He brings up next year's Apple's operating system, so that will mean it spans obviously across iPhone, iPad, but also don't forget there is new AI stuff coming in supposedly in iOS 26.4. It might get delayed to like 26.5, 26.6, all the way to 27. Anything could happen, but supposedly, according to him, there will be new AI features in 27 beyond what's already promised. This is an area where, according to Gurman, Apple is still playing catch-up. I think that's a fair statement. That means, by and large, next year's upgrade will revolve mostly around performance and AI. There will also be some enhancements for enterprise users and bespoke features for users in emerging markets, but those are less critical. These twin goals make sense. Apple can ill afford to fall in any further behind in the race for AI. People say that, but I just want to bring up that in the stock price valuation race, Apple is now 140 billion behind Nvidia. They were like $500 billion behind. So Nvidia today dropped by like 3.5%. Apple increased by 1%. They're now ahead of Microsoft by over $500 billion. Apple is at 4.14 trillion. Microsoft is at 3.54. So it's actually $600 billion. And Google recently overtook Microsoft and now stands at $3.88 trillion. So still notably a little bit behind Apple, but also notably ahead of Microsoft. I'm just trying to tell people, like, this idea that, oh my God, this AI race is very temporary. Believe me. Like, AI by itself will not go away, but this belief that AI is everything to the market, this belief that AI is like the main driver of all growth in the industry, that, oh my God, why does... I should really go to charging with USB-C, because it is connected right away. I want to connect my MagSafe, but it just refuses to light up. If I tilt it, it just connects for a second, but then disconnects. I think my magnets are a little bit worn up, Jesus Christ, I've never had it that it refused to work for that long. I tripped recently again over the cable. I assumed that to kind of hurt the magnets, and it's a little bit too much. It still will charge, but this is definitely a cable that's designed to be worn out over time. Like, especially if, like me, after a stream, you tend to trip over the cable quite often, which, thank God, it's not USB-C, because USB-C would drag my Mac alongside it or destroy my port. Yeah, maybe I should just get a new MagSafe cable, or maybe at first I should just try to clean up the magnet portion inside both the cable and on the Mac port side. Just as no Leopard made tweaks to the interface overhaul in Leopard, I believe that iOS 26 will include adjustment to the new styling that launched with iOS 26. That makes sense too. iOS 8 and after that iOS 9 and iOS 10 continue to refine the visual design that was introduced with iOS 7. Already, Apple has been tweaking its latest OS since their release in September. It recently added options to customize the glass styling for the lock screen, clock, and an option to tint the glass effect for improved legibility. All of that makes sense. So obviously there will be a new Siri voice assistant in 26.4. Supposedly there's a new AI agent for health features, supposedly tied to a Health Plus subscription, which I assume is going to add more value to Fitness Plus, because I just don't see people using Fitness Plus a lot. I hope it's included in Apple One. Because I'm just not going to subscribe to something like that. And an expansion of the AI-powered web search, which is interesting because that's not really a system feature. But yeah, that one is supposed to rival ChatGPT and Perplexity. To be quite honest, I don't actually think it's designed for that. I think it's just designed to make things like Spotlight search more functional right away. So you don't have to always go to ChatGPT or to another app. If you're just asking something basic like, how old is this celebrity or something like that, like think about these features already being something that Siri can answer. I would expect this to be just a better and now AI-based version of that. Apple has been testing a full-fledged chatbot app. It's interesting. He says they've been testing it, but in his own reporting, I remember him saying they're testing it to test this feature, not that they're testing the actual chatbot app, which, yes, it serves as an internal text-based proving ground for the re-architected Siri. That is not the same as Apple testing this as a chatbot. While Apple has no plans to offer a standalone chatbot app, yes, unless Apple makes a chatbot app that allows you to include other chatbots. That would be a huge, huge attack on the likes of Perplexity, but it would be cool. Like if you could have an app where Apple controls basic privacy, basic security, basic system access, and then the only thing that goes out of it is based on whatever like LLM you connect it to, whatever account you log into that would be amazing. But no, I do not need a chatbot from Apple. I've said it time and time again. I treat a chatbot from Apple the same way I do Apple making a full-on Google search alternative or a full-on YouTube alternative. It's such a large-scale project. I only want Apple to do if they truly believe they can do it. If they just do it out of the current AI hype and they line up to buy 1 million new NVIDIA GPUs just as everyone else, and it drives prices further up for us consumers and gamers on the PC side. And yeah, I don't want that whatsoever. Like, leave chatbots to the others. Give Apple some basic chatbot functionality, similar to how like Spotlight Search has some basic web search capabilities, and I'm fine. Again, he's saying a move that if Apple made a chatbot, it would pay massive dividends for Apple. I think that, yes, purely financially, that could be the case. But I think out of all the moves, out of all the redesigns, out of growing their hardware portfolio, out of introducing new hardware paradigms, I think this is the first thing that I have heard of that I actually believe could hurt Apple's internal structure. It could turn Apple into an entity more like Microsoft, which has absolutely no devotion to their core products except for make more money from them. It could turn them into an entity like Google, which launches a project, cancels it, launches a project, cancels it, collects an egregious amounts of data, even though I believe they still use it better than the likes of Facebook. I don't want that. I want Apple to stay Apple. And I know Apple will change over the years. I know that Tim will soon be replaced in the next 2-3 years, I assume. But I'm so like tired of this all. The AI upgrades are a gigantic priority, with engineering teams throughout the company developing them. Inside Craig's Federici software engineering group, Sebastian Marino, the vice president of intelligent system experience, is working on the user-facing Apple Intelligence enhancements, and we already know that vision. So I assume this is for features like cleanup in the Photos app, so things that are disconnected from Siri but are still based on Apple Intelligence. And we already know that Vision Pro creator Mark Rockwell is leading the Siri side of things, and then Giandrea is leading more of almost like a scientific research inside Apple for AI. Like Apple is currently slated to like introduce a lot of papers on AI and things like that. So let's see what comes out of that group, I guess. The company also has teamed up with Google to bring Gemini. Google just introduced Gemini 3, by the way. Very well received. It's not a revolution. It's not a complete like destruction of ChatGPT or Claude, which just got like 4.5 version itself. But I actually think that if you take what Gemini 3 Pro is, you think about a 1 trillion parameter model. You think about running that specifically under Apple's instructions and with Apple's modifications and with another 4 or 5 months of refinements, and you run it on private cloud compute. You combine it with a Siri on-device version that has some understanding, of course, of language, of what's happening on your device. I think that's quite honestly all I need, and I know that's still a high bar, is I need this to work well, but I don't need any more. For any more with just a general chatbot, I'll just go to like, I've got a year free of like Perplexity, right? So I'm left and right trying out ChatGPT 5.1 versus Gemini 3 Pro, trying out the base models versus the thinking models. And it's all like fine. None of that will change any of my workflows or how I like live day to day, and I'm fine with Apple not doing that. So that's the first story of the day. We've talked about almost an hour for it. I think this story, honestly, like there is one thing here that I am not sure if he just wrote it because, well, that's how he imagines it's happening, right? Or if he's actually talked with people, right? So the way he described it is the following. Where was it? Teams are now combing through Apple's OS, hunting for bloat to cut, bugs to eliminate, and any opportunity to meaningfully boost performance and overall quality. This is what I expect to be happening because this reminds me more of iOS 12. I do not see necessarily like all of this being based on some revolutionary new version of Metal or something like that. Though it could help, of course, if we got like Metal 4.5 or Metal 5 out of this. This does not quite read like Snow Leopard, because again, Snow Leopard focused on actually huge changes that were accompanied by other hardware changes back in the day. I also think that leaving Intel Macs in the past will help it, similar to how Snow Leopard was helped by leaving PowerPC Macs in the past. Like, I would love to know what exact like efforts Apple is making for performance and quality improvements. If it's as basic as this, I'm actually hopeful that that release by itself will not suffer early issues like Snow Leopard did, but we'll have to wait and see. That's about it for the Mark Gurman reporting today. I know I'm quite rambly today. Honestly, did not expect that. Speaking of all the AI stuff, all the poaching stuff, like Jony Ive and what is his name? Sam. I always want to call him Sam Friedman. It's Sam Altman. They basically talked a lot about their software, their upcoming AI hardware project, without saying anything. So first, OpenAI boss Sam Altman, finally we have the first prototypes. I can believe how jaw-droppingly good the work is and how exciting it is. But also, now getting to the benefit of hindsight and looking at the progress, the process backwards, how much it's all in there, and how it wouldn't have worked any other way. And then out of the end of it comes this I hate this. It comes this extraordinary thing. This is such bullshit for a prototype. Like, I hate the entire AI cycle right now. This hyping up of something that's years away. Like, they said that it's about 2 years away. It could be. Like, in the interview, the duo revealed that they have their first AI hardware prototype and expect to start building the product in less than 2 years. So the launch would be a little over 2 years away, probably. And again, what would this even be based on? Like, so it's not a smartphone, but will it be like the Humane AI pin, basically? Also, like, I know like ChatGPT and other AI has obviously come a long way since the Humane AI pin. It's still not good enough to like control the entire operating system. I still want a screen to tap or something like that, or glasses where at least have some way of interacting with them. Is it going to be based on Android? Is it like a standalone, or like, is it going to be based on Android with like Google Play services, or is it going to be based on Android as just like the underlying code? Like, it's such the problem with this kind of overpromising so early on. And like, Steve's ex-wife, or Steve's wife, like, yeah, like, I mean, Steve died. You get what I mean? Like, she did this interview, like Lorraine Paul Jobs. It's all like, I know she's friends with Jony Ive. Like, I assume she probably got some money for that too. Which, like, again, everybody get the bag while it's still hot at AI related things. And I do not try to like shit on this just to be not a smartphone, but I feel like this is the very definition of like trying to reinvent the wheel when there is very clearly no necessity for it. Like, I feel like this company in particular, OpenAI right now, would be so much better served by giving us like better AI and maybe working with Apple and Google to integrate it deeper. But yeah, to me, all of this is like, it's gobbledygook. Like, I believe they even talked about it. Like, I think, yeah, there was, here are several ways that Altman and Ive described their AI hardware device. It breaks the constraints of the same kind of computer that you've been using for a long time. Guys, iPhones didn't even break the constraints of like a regular laptop, because that's still the perfect form factor for big apps, for interacting with things like like a Final Cut timeline, or for coding. Like, this idea that these guys, after a few months, are coming up with a brand new computing paradigm on top of AI that we know is not good enough for this. I'm sorry, no. Is going to be able to know everything you've ever thought about, read, or said? No. That the memory of AI is simply not good enough. It will be a sort of active participant that's proactive in a not annoying way. Okay, I hate active participant hardware when it's proactive, when it's doing things I don't want it to do, when it's bothering me with things I don't want to be interrupted by. This is not just something that goes for AI. This is not just something that goes for a new piece of hardware. Like, on my smartphone, I put it mostly in do not disturb. I have like most apps even deactivated to have like the notification badge on, just because I don't want to see that garbage. If I want to go to an app and check it, that's when I'll do it. Like, yeah, phone messages, SMS, crucial emails. Even then, one of my most important accounts, I don't even have like set up in my email app. I go to the web client twice a day and then I'm fine. Current devices and apps are like walking through Times Square in New York with flashing lights, crowds of people, noises, etc. It doesn't make our lives peaceful and calm or let us focus on other stuff. Again, the reason why it's not the current devices, it's features like TikTok and Twitter and doom scrolling, and it's news that's pandering more to your fears than just like your thirst for knowledge. It's our short attention span driving us from one piece of content to another. It has nothing to do with the very nature of smartphones or tablets or smartwatches. I hate when people talk down, because Jony Ive obviously contributed a lot to things like smartphones, tablets, smartwatches. And he now basically says, oh, I'm going to make a device that, in my assumption, is not going to have a screen. And because it doesn't have a screen, like, you're going to use it differently, sure, and it's not going to run all of those distractions, but people will still have a smartphone. This device will not make people give up on smartphones. If you want people to actually move away from smartphones, in my opinion, you have to make either like great glasses, even like lenses that work like that, or make a better smartphone, whatever that means. Hey, I'm not being paid like what, $7 billion to make up a product for Altman. If you have an AI that you trust to do things for you and filter things out with incredible contextual awareness of your whole life, then you can go for a vibe that's not walking through Times Square. Ive and Altman's device aims to bring some of the spirit of, and this is what got me going. Excuse me, I have to activate my most pretentious voice here. Sitting in the most beautiful cabin by a lake in the mountains and just sort of enjoying the peace and calm. I hate it. I hate the pretentiousness of it all. It's literally, it feels like something that Jony Ive would want to say in an Apple keynote video, but somebody would tell him, "Hey Johnny, can you lower it by 10%? Look, we're Apple. We use superlatives every day of the week, every hour of the day. You can call it fantastic, innovative, user experience changing. But can we please leave the bullshit in Britain with your accent?" I've said he prefers solutions that teeter on appearing almost naive in their simplicity and their feel. That's fine, though it does clash a little bit with a much more tech-savvy generation. I feel like that incredible simplicity is fine, and I prefer it for certain things, but it just leaves out of the consideration that like people are now used to technology, right? They hold it in their hands, they wear it on their wrist, like some even put it, like they put it in their ears at least, right? It's not like introducing people to a new technology feature is entirely like complicated, right? Like just trying to dumb everything down. It worked when people had zero understanding of technology and it was necessary to bring them closer to technology. But I feel like we have moved way past like the first iPhone in 2007 and the first iPad in 2010. We're just way beyond that. He also likes incredibly intelligent, sophisticated products that you want to touch. That I agree. You want to use them almost carelessly. It kind of almost sounds like he's talking about lovemaking. And talking about lovemaking, I've told Altman that the design is right when you want to lick it or take a bite out of it. And with the current prototype, Altman got that feeling. I actually agree with Jony Ive, as pretentious and as silly as that sounds. I got that feeling with liquid glass, and I haven't had that feeling in quite a while. Uh, the degree to which Jony Ive chipped away at every little thing that this doesn't need to do or that doesn't need to be there is remarkable. I highly assume this is coming now from Altman. There is something about when the design gets like so simple and beautiful and playful, for lack of a better word. There aren't a lot of products with humor in this area, and there is a desire not to take ourselves quite so seriously, even though these are serious times. What does that even mean? What, like, world conflicts have anything to do with your bullshit AI products? Whatever, man. Altman said that early on, I've said we're going to make people smile. This now almost sounds like Johnny is like Santa Claus. Ho, ho, ho. We're going to make people smile. We're going to make people feel joy. Whatever the product does, it has to do that. Altman said it's lovely to have some whimsy back. The prototypes are jaw-droppingly good and exciting. Like, I find it funny how Apple has been criticized for so many years for superlatives and unnecessary, like, joie de vivre style talking points and whatever, like carpe diem, basically. This is 10 times worse than anything I've read from Apple in the last decade. Even when they were introducing a brand new product like Apple Vision Pro, they didn't talk like that. Even when they were showing like literal glass building blocks. This is why I dislike that Jony left Apple, because I think that Jony is still a great designer, and I like his spirit, and I like what he has to say about design. But Jony needs to be contained. We at Apple, and I mean people in the Apple community, we know that Jony tends to go too far, make devices too thin, cut back on crucial like the iPhone Air is an example of that right now. It's not built by Jony Ive, but it's clearly built by by people with a similar mindset to Jony Ive. And guess what? It's not a very successfully selling product. And guess what? Before Apple went back to making thicker, heavier Macs, even when they partnered them with more efficient Apple silicon, that made those devices better. And their design was more simplistic and more utilitarian in a way. And I really hope Apple doesn't screw it up when they switch to M6 and OLED and try to make the device thinner for, in my opinion, almost no reason, especially when we're talking about the MacBook Pro. I know there are technologies that can bring thickness down, like a vapor chamber is thinner than a usual fan setup. A tandem OLED screen is thinner than a mini LED panel. You can use a silicon carbon battery or something, or at least like a stacked battery to reduce, like, not the actual battery capacity, but give you the same, like 72 watts and 100 watts in a smaller form factor. I understand that. But fundamentally, I would also like to just see those technologies in the same chassis and what that would mean for better cooling and potentially, like, not even making the device too expensive, because now the build is recycled from before. Like, I know it sounds less exciting, but for a product like the MacBook Pro, that's honestly not selling itself on excitement. It's selling itself on high performance, almost unique features like the unified memory aspect of it, like a phenomenal screen. Like, you can make like better designs, like, for example, you can get rid of the notch and build a very small dynamic island on top or something like that. But no, overall, do I need a redesign? Not really. Like, if you are going to do a redesign, do it similar to what the iPhone 17 Pro did. I love that design, not only because I love how it feels. I always prefer the feel of aluminum in my hand. But I love the utilitarian aspect of how much it boosts cooling, how the internal structure can allow for a bigger battery and better components in general by pushing a lot more into that plateau area. These are the things that are honestly antithetical to what Jony Ive does, and sounding from a lot of the pretentious bullshit they're talking about here, it does not sound like he moved beyond, like, some of his worst vices, the vices that Steve was really good at holding back. But yeah, that's about the story. Again, I don't want to shit on this. We'll have to see it when it comes out in 2 years. Again, a lot of things can change in 2 years. The AI bubble, I don't think is popping for the next 3 years or so. I hope it does. It would definitely make a lot of hardware in the market cheaper and more exciting for the regular consumer because you could finally access it better. But overall, yeah, it's interesting, right? At the very least, it's more competition potentially, even though I don't think it will actually amount to much. This is just going back to the AI talk. Unfortunately, a lot of AI talk. I know Riley probably booted himself out when he heard me talking so much about AI. But basically, this is bringing up the same things that I've talked about. If the private cloud compute version of Siri is based on Gemini 3, that's very promising. By that time, we should have something like Gemini 3.1 or 3.5 out there, however they want to brand it. Also, I hope that Apple keeps customizing that LLM specifically for their use cases, training it on data that either they buy or that they generate even internally by making like their own engineers like simulate Siri work stuff. And then of course I will assume that it will just keep improving more and more over time as it collects data, as it gets accustomed to user behavior. I hope Apple actually collects that data. I don't want, obviously, that data to be linked specifically to you, but I do think there are ways in which Apple can collect that data and use it well without, like, hurting actual user privacy or security. So we talked a lot about AI, but now we can actually move beyond to some hardware or to some products. Let's talk with some basic stuff, or not so basic, at least not in terms of price, because we talked a lot about pretentious designers when we talked about Jony Ive. Apple Pocket is now fully sold out worldwide. So however ridiculous you thought this product is, whether it's in its short form for $150 or its long form for $230, however you like individual colors or not, yeah, it's all sold out. It was available in the US, France, China, Italy, Japan, Singapore, and South Korea, and the United Kingdom. It wasn't available in my home country of Germany. These more design-friendly markets, these more pretentious markets, one might say, but in a good way. I don't think it's actually bad. I think I prefer this over like $50,000 watches or something like that. Devices that I think have absolutely, like, they cost so much money that at that point I start to be a little bit moralistic and ask like people, wouldn't you be better off like donating that money? And hey, if you just want more money, like, look, there are people who love old watches and collect them and whatever. Look, if you're doing this out of love, the same for cars, right? But if you're just buying something as a status symbol, you're a moron. Now, this is also, in my opinion, a pretty silly status symbol, but in a price range that I think makes it far, far less moronic. And yes, the market has spoken. This was seemingly very successful. I'm not sure if Apple will keep refreshing this. This is from the designer that makes Steve's famous turtleneck. Apple has also recently launched another fashion accessory that's built in cooperation with the accessibility community. It's basically like a MagSafe attachment. That seems to be selling well too, but probably not as well as this. So again, not the things that Apple does focus on, right? Because just making it doesn't mean there is a focus. This is something probably a designer created and Apple just said, okay, let's sell through us. Maybe one or two designers at Apple like had one eye at this or something like that. But it's something playful. Again, my hot take the first time was, this is not a standard Apple accessory, so chill out. This is not even like the freaking wheels for the Mac Pro. At least those wheels had some function. It felt kind of insulting for the wheels to be $700, because if you are somebody who buys the Mac Pro, an already very expensive investment for like your company or your own personal enterprise, price, whatever you're doing, right? Like, it kind of feels like stupid to pay $700 for wheels. Let's say if your workflow actually necessitates some wheels. Like, sure, could you be building some alternative yourself? Yeah, but that's stupid too. If Apple makes them and if they cost like $100 or even $200, that would be one thing. It's the same thing with the stand for the Pro Display XDR. Like, it being $1,000 is weird. Like, the problem is, I actually understand that the combined price of $6,000 is not that terrible, like of the display and the stand. But at that point, you don't charge $5,000 for the display and $1,000 for the stand. You probably charge like $5,500 for the display and $500 for the stand, which, yes, it would still be a very expensive stand, but I doubt that Snazzy Labs would have done his video making fun of people making fun of the Pro Display XDR stand if it was only $500 rather than $1,000. But speaking of actually more exciting hardware, we talked about the possibility of the iPad mini getting an OLED screen. Interestingly, this seems to line up with some previous reports that iPad mini would not launch early next year, like alongside a potential new iPad Air or MacBook Air or something like that, but it would come at the end of 2026 and therefore come with a more exciting upgrade that includes an OLED screen. Now, according to recent reports, this screen will be made by Samsung. Though, as per usual, I would expect it to maybe start out as being only Samsung, and then over time, LG takes over for some production, right? You can see it how you want. Supposedly, Samsung is eyeing like a 3 million order for the OLED panels, and it would come in the third or fourth quarter of 2026. Again, this could also mean it actually launches later, because if this is based more on Samsung's internal production cycles, that would obviously mean just because Apple gets the panels in the third or fourth quarter, doesn't mean that they will ship out devices in the third or fourth quarter. Supposedly, this will have an 8.4-inch display, and it will move to OLED. However, it will not include LTPO technology, still being limited to LTPS, so it would not have variable refresh rate, and most likely not higher refresh rate, so it would not qualify to be a ProMotion screen, and it would be a single light emitting layer rather than the dual layer of tandem OLED. To be honest, all of that makes sense to me, especially in 2026. Like, a lot of people said, the iPhone 17 got ProMotion. Yes, but the iPhone 17 is an $800 smartphone, and it faces a lot more competition in that space than the iPad mini does. In all honesty, I think that boosting performance, RAM, and storage probably usually has more impact on iPad sales, and just jumping from LCD to OLED is going to be another good selling point. And then 2 years down the line, you could upgrade it to LTPO, especially as by that point, I assume LTPO will be even cheaper and even more mass producible than it is right now. But yes, if you want the absolute best iPad screen, right now, your best candidate, of course, is the iPad Pro, and it's probably going to remain that way until, like, now this is if you are willing to move beyond the iPad. That is when the M6 MacBook Pro is rumored to be getting the same tandem OLED displays either late 2026 or early 2027. One thing that I would kind of say is, I think if this is an LTPS, non-ProMotion, non-high refresh rate screen, I would actually bet on this iPad mini to be the same price as the current one, unless they double base storage, like from 128 to 256 gigabytes. I could see it then being $599 rather than $499, because like without promotion, there goes a pretty important selling point. I don't think one that would define people either buying or not buying the iPad mini entirely, but I think it could really justify like some people saying, oh, I will buy it for 600, no questions asked. Hell, give me the 512 gigabyte version or something like that. I could see that, but if it's non-promotion, I could see people being a bit more stingy in their cost decisions, right? Saying, oh, it costs $500, but I mean, it's better than the previous generation, but I really would like promotion. But then they see it go on sale for like $450, or maybe it's like a small price increase to like $550. And people wait for like a $50 to $70 price reduction on sale, Black Friday, whatever, to then buy it, right? Or maybe some store sells it in like a package together with like an Apple Pencil Pro, for like where the Apple Pencil Pro suddenly doesn't cost $130, but only $20 or $30, and you basically save $100 on the combined package, right? That's not something that Apple will do, but it's definitely something that you might see through third-party resellers and things like that. But yeah, it would be disappointing, obviously, if you're somebody who really loves that form factor and for whom price is no issue. You would pay any price to just get the best iPad mini possible. But I also think that it's probably smart to keep costs relatively down. Right now, RAM is exploding in pricing. Storage is, because of all that AI demand. Like you probably don't want to add like a 2 times more expensive display to all of that. That being said, I really hope Apple does at least update the iPad mini then relatively soon. Like it really could use like 12 gigs of RAM just to make sure it stays compatible with all the latest apps and games. I really hope it would get like Apple's N1 and C1 chips, or at that point, I don't know, N1 and C2 or something like that. All things, by the way, that could help Apple bring down bill of materials costs down as well. But yeah, obviously, I'm not commenting here on the final pricing. The market is very volatile. Inflation is still a thing. Not so much outside of the United States, but hey, it's still 3% in the United States. If you think about 3% one year, 3% another year, if you think about the disproportionate impact on inflation on individual parts like RAM and storage, suddenly a product that I thought was kind of like a slam dunk for a $599, 256 gigabytes and LTPO display suddenly looks more like, does it make more sense to make it cheaper, but with a worse panel and less storage? And then people still have to buy their way up to upgrade it. Again, all of this is very speculative. I'm not even saying that this rumor is very much worth listening to. A lot of stuff could change. But yeah, I assume if Apple is ordering LTPS screens at this point from Samsung, I would assume that they're doing so in the hope to really like bring the bill of material costs down for this product, and then a subsequent iPad Air as well, because I don't think that an iPad Air would suddenly be LTPO based, but an iPad mini is LTPS based. I think that they will stay definitively as a cheaper alternative to the ProMotion on the iPad Pro. We've seen that on the iPhone for years, right? iPhones were OLED on both the Pro and the base model since iPhone 12, but then the 13 Pro got ProMotion, the base model didn't. The 14 Pro got ProMotion, the base model didn't. The 15 Pro got ProMotion, the base model didn't. And then finally, the 16 Pro got ProMotion, and the base model still didn't. It wasn't up until the iPhone 17 Pro that the base 17 got ProMotion. And don't forget, the iPhone 16e, which is still a more expensive product than the iPad mini, right? The iPhone 16e is a $600 product. The iPad mini currently is a $500 product. That one is still on like a display with a notch, pretty thick bezels. It's LTPS. It's barely like 800 nits. It's really, really bad relative to like what you can get in the market at around that $600 price point or even below that. And Apple will use their pricing power to give the iPad mini similar advantages, right? Just because it's an Apple device doesn't mean it's premium, like in all aspect. For that, you buy the Pro models. That's just how Apple rolls. And that's what makes people get Pro models. Unfortunately, though, for the iPad mini, where there is no same-sized Pro version, that's disappointing, right? Because when you look at the iPad Air, if you want a better iPad Air, you buy an iPad Pro, right? It's the same form factor. It's actually thinner and lighter, and it has a better chip. Sure, yes, you pay for all of that on top of obviously the tandem OLED panel and everything. But you get something out of that. With iPad mini, if you love that form factor, but if you want something much better in the Apple ecosystem, well, I guess for that you might have the iPhone Fold next year. But we'll get to that once we get to that. Now, speaking of the iPhone Fold, there have actually been a number of rumors, and this is why this would be. This is why I wanted to end on this story. Actually, let me test one thing before I get to this story. Did a new beta release launch today, like of iPadOS or something like that? Seemingly not yet. So. I hope it still launches today so I can play around with it, but there's a chance that Apple might just be taking the Thanksgiving week off. First is the fact that the iPhone Air might actually use a very large battery by iPhone standards. Rumors by news aggregator account UX1122, an account we've actually covered quite a lot. They have a decent track record, not perfect, but good enough to cover. And according to them, the iPhone Fold will have a capacity of between 4,400 and 5,800. Now, the reason why such numbers early on are imprecise, because right now we are looking at prototypes, probably several different ones, some a little bit thicker, some a little bit taller and wider, some will be up in the air, right? When you look, for example, at Samsung and what they actually label as like 5,000 milliampere hours, you'll find that the minimum capacity for that is actually more rated in the 4,800 range. So depending on which number you're getting, you're probably better off at giving a range. So you're probably like roughly talking about like a 5,600 milliampere hour device right now, which would be roughly 10% more battery than the iPhone 17 Pro Max, at least if we are talking about the United States version, which is not longer a United States exclusive, but hey, it's still not here for me in Germany, where I have to work with like a 4850 version, unfortunately, or even like 4830, I think. I would assume that the iPhone Fold will not come with a SIM card. It's probably going to be more similar to the iPhone Air, where it's just trying to push people to an eSIM future. This will be a premium product at the absolute highest end of the product stack. The people buying it are probably like tech savvy enough, and they probably get good enough service at their carrier, their cellular providers to make sure that their eSIM works. I know it's still like, I know that some content creators still prefer physical SIMs so they can easily take them in and out of multiple devices and have no limitations, because sometimes eSIMs unfortunately like lose their minds if you do that too often. I understand that. For regular users, I still think eSIMs are a far better solution. Hell, even China has like one carrier now that allows it. I think if Apple pushes it more aggressively next year and marries it to their most premium, most expensive product, I think many more carriers will eventually give in, and it will become much more of a standard, and that will also help Apple bring more and more models without a physical SIM card tray to more and more markets. Maybe the base model still keeps the SIM card tray as an option in certain regions, but the Pro models might go eSIM only worldwide. Maybe not next year, but maybe in 2 years or something like that. Again, there's a lot of speculation on my part. I'm trying to, like, whenever we have like one individual rumor, like this is an exciting like spec leak, right? Like 4400 to 5800. Now it's my task to debate what could this be based on. Well, when you also think about it, the iPhone Air has like what, 3150 milliampere hours. This would be a bit less than two iPhone Airs stacked next to each other. It might actually be thinner than the iPhone Air, but then be similar in other aspects. It probably is going to be titanium based for the durability and everything like that. The other point is, of course, technologies like silicon carbon, right? Or stacked batteries, or whatever technology Apple will use to boost the density of their batteries. There has been a rumor that Apple would actually use that technology first on the iPhone Air. And since that didn't pan out, and we're actually not expecting an iPhone Air next fall, but rather in the spring of 2027, it is very likely that that this product would actually have Apple's first true high density battery inside. It also would explain some rumors for the iPhone 18 Pro Max that said the device would actually get a little bit thicker and heavier to potentially accommodate better cameras, but also a larger battery. And if we assume that silicon carbon is still a little bit production limited, at least in relation to something like Apple's Pro Max or Pro series in general, right? Well, now it makes sense. If Apple wants to maybe give the iPhone 18 Pro Max the same battery capacity as an iPhone Fold, but they want to do it in a traditional form factor, a slab form factor, yeah, now they will have to make it just a bit thicker and heavier. While this one can utilize silicon carbon, which again will also probably bring up a bill of materials even further and everything like that. Apple also likes to keep their batteries with a little bit of wiggle room for expansion, so we don't get a Galaxy Note 7 scenario. So yeah, that to me makes sense. If it gets close to 6,000 milliampere hours, that will be phenomenal battery life, especially if you're just using the external screen. But I think even for the internal screen, considering that the iPad mini has I believe a 4400 milliampere hour battery similar to the Galaxy Z Fold 7, that will be better battery life than an iPad mini. Of course, on top of that, you will get a much better screen, much more efficient screen, a 2-nanometer processor, Apple's next generation Wi-Fi modem, Apple's next generation cellular modems. So there will be a lot of technologies in here to actually help make this 5,600 milliampere hour battery last a lot longer than similar devices with that kind of capacity. Google Pixel 10 Pro Fold comes at around 5,015, so this will even be on top of that, of course, with much more efficient components. We have some Chinese companies that have like 6,000 milliampere hours roughly or so in their devices. That is probably what Apple is looking to immediately beat, right? Because those devices with a less efficient chip, with a less optimized operating system, they will simply not last as long, even on 6,500 milliampere hours, as Apple can do on 5,500. We see Apple with 5,100 compete with devices with like 7,500 milliampere hours. Yes, Apple will lose in most scenarios, but by an hour or two, not by like the 50% difference that you could imply from the capacity difference. So this is actually really exciting, and this could push me to buy it. One thing that could push me to not buy it is the cost. Now, I will say I don't care which research company you're from or whatever. I truly don't care. However, this is a price point that I have advocated for, or that I have brought up by myself quite a lot, and I just, I guess I could be one of the analysts at that company. So they have price estimates of anything from 1,800 to 2,500. Some say now again 2,400. We've seen Min-Chi Kuo bring up 2,000 to 2,500. We've seen Mark Gurman bring up prices around the $2,000 range. Again, don't forget we're getting inflation this year. Don't forget some of the core technologies right now are not fully figured out yet. Like, yes, I assume the basic panel and the basic folding mechanism is done, but like every single layer of like titanium under the screen or whatever was rumored to make the crease go away, all of that could change at least enough to like change the pricing considerations, right? It's also currently rumored to have 2 cameras. Who knows? Maybe Apple changes their minds and gives it 3 cameras. Maybe they think that the enthusiast market will actually care about something like that. That will bring up cost. Then that cost will depend on what kind of third camera will they implement. So again, all of this is now speculation, and now this is not only speculation on my part, but this is speculation from Min-Chi Kuo, Mark Gurman, and the analyst Arthur Liao at Fubon Research. But I do actually think that $2,400, I brought up $2,200 a lot on this channel. It would be $1,000 more expensive than the Pro Max. I think it would be $800 more expensive than the 512 gigabyte version. My assumption is that this one starts with 512 gigabytes and then offers a 1 terabyte and 2 terabyte configuration. Maybe they even, for logistical reason, consolidate those and make 512 and 2 terabyte only options. This became a very speculative episode. I definitely didn't think that would be the case. But yeah, over $2,000 is definitely where I expect it to be. I definitely don't expect to be higher than 2,500 in the base configuration, but I do expect it to be very close to $3,000 in its maximum configuration. In fact, if you think about it starting at $2,399, you add $200 to go from 512 gigabytes to 1 terabyte. That's $2,600. And then you add another $400 to go from 1 terabyte to 2 terabytes, and suddenly you end up with a product that costs $29.99. Now it makes sense, right? Like Apple likes round numbers like that whenever they're capable of reaching them. Like when you think about it, like the current iPhone Pro Max starts at $1,200. Then it costs, yeah, I think it actually costs exactly. Wait, does the iPhone 17 Pro Max max out at $1,800 or at $2,000? I think it maxes out at $2,000, right? Oh, there's an Apple Store shopping event. How nice! I didn't even know, but that Apple does stuff around Black Friday. I guess my brain pushed that info out. So when we look at the Pro Max, $1,199, deep blue. Yeah, it's exactly $2,000 for the 2 terabyte model. I think if they make the Fold an exact grand on top of that, honestly, yeah, I think it could work. I wouldn't like that. Like, I definitely wouldn't be buying the 2 terabyte version. I probably would be buying 1 terabyte. But or if they are a little bit more generous, they start with 512, get rid of 1 terabyte, just make 2 terabytes $400 more expensive, would still end up at $27.99, which at that point you're probably asking, like, they would probably only consolidate it for logistical reasons. I think they would find buyers for every storage configuration, to be honest. I think there are just some people who don't need more storage than 512, and even if you're a premium buyer, you're just gonna buy this one to save a bit of money. Then you're gonna have your enthusiasts like me who want the latest and greatest, but also don't want to be overpaying too much. So you will feel good about saving like 13% by going with 1 terabyte rather than 2 terabyte. And then there are people who just buy automatically the most expensive device in existence for a little bit of showing off, but also because they have so much money, they simply don't care. And those people would buy 2 terabytes, whether it's 2,500 or 2,800 or 3,000. I think only above 3,000 would some people start thinking, oh, maybe I'll just not give Apple that much money. But if the 2 terabyte costs anywhere over $3,000, then that means the 1 terabyte costs pretty close to $3,000. So Apple is definitely going to be making a lot of money on this product. And I think one reason why they're actually going to be making a lot of money on this product is because they're launching to the market, definitely not first. By that time, we'll have the 8th generation of the Galaxy Z Fold out there. But Apple has recently built 100 iPhone Folds after a breakthrough. And the reason why I think that this device will sell well is because that breakthrough is about eliminating the crease. And I think we have 7 generations of the Z Fold 7. I think up until like the Z Fold 4, the crease was completely unacceptable for me. I think it still is for the most part, especially after prolonged usage. Like if you could guarantee to me that it will look forever as good as it does on day one, as it does on the Z Fold 7, and it costs under $2,000, at least in its starting configuration, I could accept that. But if we are talking about a product that could be close to $3,000, I expect it to look as the Galaxy Z Fold 7 does on day one, 3-4 years later, right? I really expect this to be as, maybe not quite as long lasting as a traditional smartphone. It is a new form factor with compromises. I really don't like a plastic screen, but I mean, we do have technically ultra thin glass, but then that one is covered by more plastic, so it's not even a good feeling screen. But yeah, to me, eliminating the crease is absolutely crucial to making me appreciate a product at this price range over a slab smartphone that will actually have certain advantages. Like it's certain, like most slab phones right now have better battery life than foldables. They have better cameras than foldables. Their screens, not only are they fully glass and better protected, but they're usually higher pixel density and they get brighter. Their cooling is much better, right? So there's a lot that is an advantage on cheaper slab products. But obviously, then you do have the but it folds argument, an argument that has never worked on me because just the visual crease, the durability concerns, all of that has really been icky to me. But let's see how Apple solves it. The iPhone Fold has entered the next stage of production after what is said to be a breakthrough in eliminating the crease normally seen in folding phones when they are laid flat. Although the display is made by Samsung, several elements are said to have been designed. It should be noted that it is made by Samsung Display. I know a lot of people like to abbreviate Samsung as one company, basically. There's some truth to that, but also at its core, Samsung is broken up in multiple different companies that are actually not allowed to give themselves advantageous deals because they would be breaking anti-monopoly laws left and right. I know some people want to just give Samsung all the benefit over Apple. It's like, oh my God, Samsung invented foldables and whatever. And yeah, there's some truth to that. But when it comes to really big breakthrough in the markets, Apple has been notorious for pushing Samsung to make something that's better than what Samsung was doing by themselves. When you think about the iPhone 10 screens and its symmetrical bezels, when you think about how much better iPhone 10, 10s, 11 Pro were back in the day at reducing image retention or burn-in problems versus Samsung devices that were getting that left and right. Like when you look at color signs and the original iPhone 10 versus the color signs on any Samsung mobile OLED predating it, there is just so much between software, firmware, hardware itself, the way Apple modifies it. like this idea that, oh, this is just going to be a Samsung innovation. No, it's not. It also could be that for a year or so, similar to what has happened with LTPO, or what has happened with dual layer, tandem OLED. It takes a while for those technologies because Apple is not going to sit on all the patents. It just makes more sense for them to just co-develop those technologies with Samsung, with LG, then hoard as much as possible of the initial supply. But then later on, it makes sense for them to just let Samsung and LG produce more of those displays because that will make it cheaper for them as well. If the factories were only tuned for Apple, then Apple would have to pay way higher prices to Samsung and LG. That's why we are now getting some real tandem OLED screens, even on Windows laptops. Like there's like a Lenovo laptop that I really admire for having a proper screen like that. Again, this is all very rambly, but this is all important context because I do think that's like I see those arguments on Twitter and other platforms all the time. Oh, but it's a Samsung panel. Like, if you are truly believing that, then really, really stop participating in online discussions. Like, buy yourself, uh, buy yourself a cabin in the woods, log off, maybe take some books with you, do some actual research, and return to civilization after a few months or years, and then be a lot smarter, please. Eliminating the crease. Folding phones have been around for 7 years now, but have suffered from a number of problems. This include the display being vulnerable to damage when dust gets trapped in the device when it's folded. Yes, not just that. And an ugly crease visible in the center of the screen when it's unfolded or when it's halfway folded. A report earlier this year said this problem had been solved, and Apple was happy with the samples it had received from display partner Samsung after rejecting previous iterations provided by the Korean company. Also important, Apple potentially targeting higher price ranges than the upcoming Galaxy Z Fold 8, Apple targeting larger mass production than any like Chinese foldable. All of that is a very important consideration in pushing a company like Samsung Display to actually make a better folding screen too. Because it's important that innovation does not just happen in a vacuum. It happens because there is a financier, because there's actually a mass production incentive. It's because there's actually somebody who might be sharing some patents and ideas with you. Yes, maybe you do control most of the underlying process, but you wouldn't have been able to push yourself over the finish line without that help. Apple heavily involved in solving the problem. UDN reports Apple was heavily involved in redesigning both the panel and the fold mechanism in order to eliminate the crease. It is rumored that Apple has made breakthrough progress in the development of folding iPhone. This is also, by the way, like if you think that Apple does not invent or innovate on any of these core technologies, right? Screens, batteries, cameras, right? Why do you think Apple has hundreds of engineers for all of those individual components, especially the camera, but even also for the displays and whatever? Do you think that Apple is just generous and just overpaying those people for nothing or keeping them employed for nothing? No, it's because they know that, yes, sometimes they'll just be able to go and buy a pretty cheap LCD panel if they really need one, like for the upcoming MacBook SE, right? Or for the iPhone 16e, they just got whatever OLED panel was either old and still producible, like maybe it's the exact panel that was like on the iPhone 14 base model or something like that, or iPhone 13 base model, or they just go out and buy whatever is out there, even if it wasn't part of any pre-existing production lineup for an Apple device. Absolutely, that happens, and that's the power of a big company to just go out and purchase and even like make certain manufacturers compete with themselves to get your business. But when it comes to technologies like this, when it comes to LTPO on the and promotion on the 2017 iPad Pro, when it comes to when it comes to how OLED worked exactly on the iPhone 10, when it comes to tandem OLED on the iPad Pro, all of those things, when it comes to 5K panels needing a custom display controller on the iMac back in the day, right? All of those things were either partially enabled by Apple just through finances, were co-developed with Apple, or to be honest, were kind of like almost entirely developed by Apple and then rubber stamped by the other company because they were the company that actually is able to produce that technology. Uh, Jesus Christ. I guess I got riled up by some tweets that I had seen before. So it is rumored that Apple has made breakthrough progress in the development of the folding iPhone, solving the most criticized crease problem of non-Apple folding machines in the past, achieving a crease-free design. The inner screen is exclusively supplied by Samsung, but the panel structure, material processing process, and laminated pressing method are all designed by Apple. Sounds totally like a Samsung panel to me. And the key component bearings also shared by Apple and two suppliers, New Rixing and Amphino. I assume these are the companies making the folding mechanism development, so that when the panel and bearing are integrated, the permanent creases of the traditional folding machine in the middle of the screen can be avoided. It is reported that Honghai Group has established an exclusive production line for folding iPhone. Again, massive benefit to when Apple enters the market, certain components just become way more mass produced. That opens up room for those components to make their way to other products, cheaper products, and the more they get produced, the cheaper they become for Apple, leaving more room for either the device to get cheaper or for the device to get other value improvements while keeping the same price. It's a story as old as time at this point, which shows that folding iPhone is no longer in the experimental stage. So this is not just companies working on prototypes and working for equipment on prototypes, but companies have actually made sure that they have enough machines, that they have the space in the factory, that they will hire enough employees to actually provide those components en masse, but has entered the engineering verification and pre-production process. I believe the last time we talked that the problem has been solved. Apple put forward a difficult technical requirement to overcome the weakness of a foldable phone with wrinkles on the screen. That's a good description. And it said that it's close to the desired level. This reporting is from February 25th, 2025. So it took like 10 months almost between that, or 9 months. Another industry official said, in order to differentiate itself from the existing foldable phone, Apple decided to eliminate wrinkles regardless of price. So I've seen some people say that the Galaxy Z Fold 8 is almost guaranteed to get that improvement. I don't quite understand why you would come to that understanding. First of all, that underlying folding mechanism is gonna be Samsung made in a Z Fold, right? It, like what Apple is doing for the folding mechanism is Apple with working with some other companies. Plus, unless Samsung is willing to either eat entirely into their profit margins or increase price to the point that the device becomes entirely unattractive, I'm not sure. I think that by the Galaxy Z Fold 9, like a year later, yeah, I could see some trickle down effect, similar to how I mentioned to how, well, like almost a year and a half after the iPad Pro launched with a tandem OLED screen, we are now seeing more and more devices adopted. Still devices that are very niche, very expensive, and have none of the mass production potential of even just the iPad Pro, much less like an entire iPad family. But yeah, I could see that happen a year later. Again, it could happen, but I'm not sure. And yeah, the hinge supplier is some fennel. Oppo's latest folding phone lends credibility. I honestly, I have not seen that pan out to be that true. Like, is it better than the Z Fold 6, like the latest Oppo devices? Yes, but the Z Fold 7, wait, we did get the Z Fold 7 this year, right? Or was it the Z Fold 6? Because because I thought we got the Z Fold 7, but honestly, the branding has been so. Yeah, it's the Z Fold 7 that's out already. So yeah, the Z Fold 7 is better than the Galaxy Z Fold 8, but neither product is really fantastic. Um, and yeah, some Chinese devices have had a better solution, especially than the Z Fold 6. You could argue it might even be slightly better than the Z Fold 7, but I think that people also underestimate, especially like the longevity question. To be honest, that's not how the Z Fold 6 ever looks day one. But because a lot more people actually own Z Folds than any kind of Oppo, there tends to be way more images of a used Z Fold. Compared with like brand spanking new or at least very unused like Chinese competitive devices. And yeah, I wouldn't bet on like any of those products to have the exact same panel solution as Apple next year. And yes, because they're getting closer and closer to solving that problem, again, they've now made 100 of those iPhones with this new solution. It would be in time for a 2 nanometer screen, probably a second generation N chip for Wi-Fi, maybe something like an N2X even. It would definitely now be in time for a second generation C modem, like a C2X. Apple is rumored to be working on a C modem that would support millimeter wave. That would definitely be a thing. And yes, if Apple keeps on improving stuff with batteries, we might get silicon carbon with a product this expensive. It would kind of be silly to not do it, or at least use some other density improving technology. Yeah, so I'm very excited for this, especially if it's truly crease free, or like if you just look at this, right, this is completely unacceptable, but this is still unacceptable to me, right? But if this can be reduced by 50% more, then I could see this being like workable, especially if it doesn't degrade over time. That being said, that's about it for today's video. We've been streaming for over 2 hours, which I definitely not expect to be doing today. We see people praising the rumor for iOS 27. Oh, there was like this weird hack where people made iPadOS run on the iPhone 17 Pro Max, and that allows it to run like multiple apps at once, and that multitasking view and everything. Again, no new hardware, no new AirTags, no new HomePods, no new Apple TVs. All of that is unfortunate. Means probably we're getting actually quite a decent amount of new hardware early next year, especially if you count like up until April, when we are also probably getting the HomePad with new Siri. We're getting M5 Pro and M5 Max MacBook Pros. We're getting an M5 MacBook Air. We're getting an iPad Air with an M4 chip. Yeah, it all makes sense. But nothing groundbreaking at that point, unless you probably count like the HomePad with the new Siri and all that stuff. That's probably going to be very experience changing for a lot of people. There's also been rumors that Apple plans to launch more home accessories like smart home cameras in 2026. We'll see what happens. For now, I'm mostly excited about Tandem OLED M6 Pro, M6 Max MacBook Pro. That's my number one anticipated product for late 2026 to early 2027. I kind of don't care if it's a November release or if it's a February, March release. I'm fine with either. I'm counting them as one season. Then comes the iPhone Fold, just for the excitement. There's supposedly no big redesigns, no big changes coming for Apple Watch. You guys will have me owing you $150 by the end of the year. Probably gonna do a stream in like 3 weeks or so. We're probably gonna make a poll though on Discord, I assume, just because I know that a lot of you guys are there more, and you can stay there for 24 hours. And I might just post the proof on there, right? We're gonna give some money to charity because I highly assume we are not getting any 2 nanometer products from Apple. So that's a bet I will have lost against you, but it's a bet I'm happy to lose, knowing that the money will go to some good place. That being all said, I think we are quite through for today. My voice is starting to give out, and I really need to drink something, but I really don't want to hold up my bottle in a weird way again. Yeah, more and more companies are getting ready for Black Friday, so feel free to inform yourself about what stuff you want might actually be discounted. Don't just buy stuff because it's discounted. The economy might not do too well next year, so try saving up some money, which is probably not the best recommendation when inflation is happening, but you will still, it's probably still better to have some money that was devalued by like 3% rather than have an accessory that you truly didn't need. If you want to invest some money into something, maybe try like RAM or storage at this point. It's going up more than gold. This is not a real investment. This is advice. This is just a joke. Thank you guys so much. I had a lot of fun. I know the algorithm is screwing me right now, but I will try to get to a more regularly scheduled program. Again, I do want to introduce more non-Apple topics to the stream. I think there's going to be some Intel and AMD stuff I'll be able to talk about. If I come back this Thursday or Friday, I'm going to be a bit busy next week, but still should have time for about 2 streams or so. So don't expect me to be gone up until Christmas for another 10 days or so. And even during Christmas, I'm visiting family, so I'm probably just gonna take my laptop and my microphone with me at that point. Guys, thank you so much. You guys know the drill. Do the YouTube jazz, as we call it around here. Subscribe to the channel if you haven't yet done so. Like the video, share it out with anybody who you think might enjoy it. Leave a comment down below to help with the algorithm, but also just to let me know what you liked, what you disliked, what you would like to see me cover next. You can leave me a super chat or a super sticker whenever you catch me live. You can become a long-term channel supporter by here on YouTube or on Patreon. The link for the latter is in the description of this channel, as is the link for the Discord. This is where I'm most active. This is where you can find other similarly minded people with similar interests. So however you want to interact with me in this community, it's all very welcome. Thank you to anyone who's watching live or later on. And as always, I'll see you guys in the next one. This is Mark Tech, tuning out.